Um, how did that affect mass in Australia? I know we had lockdowns over here and the inability to go physically to mass for quite a bit. I think for about a year or so. How was that handled in Australia itself?
It we I don't think we ever had the worst of COVID. At first, I remember receiving a shocking communication um, back when COVID had first begun, and we were getting mortality figures out of Italy, which seemed to be 1 in 10 people who had the disease, it would be fatal. We, I think the whole world panicked, as it was probably prudent to do. They enlarged the cemetery in Goulburn. It was sad to see. I'd been told to prepare if COVID came the way it had done to Italy, to prepare for something like 2,000 fatalities in this town of 20. Um, it was very, very scary for those first few months when we weren't even sure exactly how the disease was transmitted and whether a vaccine was coming. My parish priest was from Kerala in India at the time, and I think India saw the worst of the world. Um, Not with the initial wave, but with the second. So in many ways, that sort of did hit close to home. One of my great aunties came down with it in the UK. People did appreciate community in those times. And we very quickly found out who was connected to the parish and had friends and who didn't. It took a lot of pastoral creativity. This was an old regional parish, so most of the congregation did not have a smartphone.
Oh,
Trying to get them to use a QR code to come into mass was a nightmare. Um, People would blame us for these restrictions, for these sort of sanctions. They'd say, "Why are you doing this?" And we'd have to say, "It's not us. It's a government's rule. We're just not trying to get sued." Probably one of the most heartbreaking were the funerals. Only 10 people were allowed to be in admittance. I had a funeral of a man who had 11 children, and they sort of had to draw straws to figure out who couldn't go to their dad's funeral. I won't mention all the ways we were sort of pastorally creative and trying to, in some ways, work with or work around these restrictions. I will say that we had wonderful police officers in the town who were more than willing to work with us. One of whom said, "We are in no way going to prosecute someone for attending a funeral." It was a tricky time because there was so much panic.
mhm.
We'd have people chartering coaches from Sydney to come to some of the small towns, buy up all of their groceries because of the runs on food in Sydney. I don't think we ever sort of faced kind of that fear ourselves. We had parishioners who owned farms. So I figured we'd always be able to to find what we need.